Updates on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons, and with me, as always, is Nathan Juan. And joining us to help talk about the French Open is our tennis expert, Tejas Prasad. We have a lot to talk to today, so let's get started. Tejas, take it away.
All right, thanks, Nathan. Yeah, so let's get started with one of the biggest headlines for tennis this year, actually, is that Federer, he's been playing amazing tennis, won the French Open, won 2 tournaments right after, the Indian Wells and Miami. And these 2 are predictors to basically saying he's going to win the US Open. It's a great predictor. But before the French Open started, he made a very interesting decision not to play the French Open, or not even play the clay season. This is actually rather interesting because, he has got a great run going on, but it's also understandable for the reason that he's been injured the past 6 months before the Australian Open. So he wanted to take a break and mainly focus on winning the titles that he actually cares about, which is Wimbledon and the US Open, and actually the hard courts. So it's rather interesting to see that he actually doesn't really care about the French or any of the clay season. That was one of the biggest shockers actually coming into the French Open. Nadal actually, right after Federer's comeback and winning the Miami and then the Indian Wells duo, Nadal came on the rise. He had a 17-1 run in the clay season, only losing 1 match to, I think it was Dominic Thiem, playing an amazing French Open right now. Set on to win 10 French Open titles. He won the Madrid and then Monte Carlo for the 10th time, which is unprecedented in tennis, actually. Those are, I guess, the 2 big things about tennis that's going on. And then the other thing is our number 1 and number 2, Novak Djokovic and Murray. This year, they have actually had not a great string either. And actually, that's very interesting to note. After Djokovic won the French Open last year, he's been on a dip. And I guess the biggest question in the tennis world is, why is Novak playing his level of play is actually lower. And there's a lot of things that are, surrounding this question. Is it lingering shoulder injuries, something with his family, something with his team problems? And I watched a lot of his games in the Australian Open and before the French Open. He's playing, his game is there, as in his physical game is there, but I feel as though he doesn't have that that push that he had when he won the Australian last year. And personally, I think after he won the French, he got the 4 Grand Slams and he's taking a chill pill. But he's just going through a rough patch. All players has gone through that. All greats, including Federer, they just go through a slump. He made a couple of interesting decisions right before the French Open. He took Andre Agassi as a coach. So that's actually a very, very interesting thing to note. So far, actually, he's been playing pretty good at the French Open. But last night, he got pushed to 5 sets against an Argentine, Diego Schwartzman, I think his name. Again, the guy he played 5 sets with was a very youngster, same age as me, actually. He's 24. But, it's just interesting to know that it's actually struggling quite early on, as these players always do when it comes to the big major titles. Murray and even Djokovic, you just step up the game, which is ridiculous. They'll be playing mediocre right before or something, or aren't even playing good. Then voila comes, the French Open, the Australian, or anything of that sort, and they just pick up the level. For me, it's rather curious to see this, but I think the main reason for this is actually it's just when it comes to those 5 sets instead of 3 sets, they just have so much experience. They know how to grind down their players, and their mentality is far beyond that. They can play these 5 sets and just play at a level when, previously they wouldn't have had that much confidence.
I have a question about the French Open specifically, because it seems like since I've been following tennis, it's always seems to be kind of a rite of passage to win that tournament. We saw how long it took Roger Federer to win that. Djokovic has been close so many times, and last year he finally broke through. And we've seen Andy Murray struggle to win there. It's just, what is it about Roland Garros and the French Open that makes it have players like Rafael Nadal be so successful there, but the other greats have their issues?
You said it. It's Nadal. He just dominated that court for the past decade or more. there's nobody else that can actually touch Nadal when he's at the prime. It's just that's about it. It's the fact that Nadal has guarded the gate to that mantle. Federer won it. Nadal was not playing. And when Djokovic won it, Nadal was on a dip.
But beyond just that too, I mean, like the reason that Roland Garros is so hard to predict going forward is that it's basically almost an entirely different game than just like hard court or even grass. Like, I mean, playing on clay, as someone that's played tennis and has played on clay courts before, I mean, it's just like there's so much like an increased risk of injury just because you're slipping and sliding on there, and so you have to learn how to just like relearn how to run on the court. But then on top of that, if you drop like a backspin on it, then like the ball barely bounces. And if you hit topspin, then it goes even faster just because of the surface itself. It's a very difficult surface to master. I mean, and granted, like if you're Rafael Nadal, then it's not difficult to master at all. But I mean, it's a very different game from hard court and grass for those reasons. And so being able to like an entirely different game in some respects is basically the reason why it takes so long for people to get the gist of it. But even then, granted, you have like people, and we'll talk about, I guess we'll talk a bit more about like further predictions, but I mean like people that were pegging Zverev, who was the 9th seed coming into this, and also had like a brother that's playing and like also in the top 25 for the ATP. He was able to win the Rome Open earlier this year, but then which is basically kind of one of the bigger tune-ups for Roland Garros, but ended up like getting knocked out in the first round. It's a hard tournament in general just to predict, just because it's kind of just like it's not the first one of the year, and it's not like as celebrated necessarily as Wimbledon. I feel it's just a difficult surface to play on, and it's just again as they just mentioned, I mean Rafael Nadal has just dominated.
And then like the other main thing adding on is that the clay court, it requires a lot of persistence. It's a lot more physical than grass or hardcore because of the fact like you have to grind down the opponents, and people who are more physical are more attuned. For example, Nadal, for that reason, is because of his game is so physical. That's the reason he can just wear down those opponents. But interestingly note, when Stan won it, Stan Wawrinka, he just brought a new style to the court. He was aggressive, like his backhand was, he was hitting flat backhands and so on and forth. And he just proved to the world, like, you can still win with such style of play in the French Open. And previously, I think 2009, Soderling demonstrated it, but no one really could redo this just because, Nadal is so dominant.
Give us some picks on, other than the big names, as we've mentioned, Djokovic, Nadal, Stan Wawrinka, Andy Murray, but give us some sleepers that you think might be able to slip into the semifinals or even into the final.
Yeah, sure. So there was, we mentioned a lot, actually, Zverev. I was expecting him to go far, but, he lost in the first round. And then so is Nick Kyrgios, but both of them are gone. Apart from that, actually, there's Dominic Thiem. He's playing consistently in the past year, and he's an amazing player. Actually, like he's got the talent for clay court. He can play on any type of court, and then in the clay season as well, he had a very good showing. I think he's the one that stopped Nadal in the previous tournament, actually. So he's got a lot of potential. Again, he's very young. He just has the mentality to like push through the 5 sets. So I would bet if anyone else like that's not that's a newcomer that's actually still left, I would place my bets on Dominic Thiem right now going forward. Actually, he's probably the best hopeful. And then Kei Nishikori is also another one. He made a couple of years ago the finals of the US Open, and he's been consistently in the top 10, top 5, top 6. Again, similar to Dominic Thiem, he's got that style of play that can fit any type of court. And then if he puts his mind to it, I think he can make a very, very big run again. So I guess those are my 2 favorites outside the top or the big 4, I would say. Like also my Milos Raonic, he's been playing okay, but he's been riddled with injuries the past couple of months. So if he's injury free, he's got a shot. So going on to the women's side, actually, it was interesting to see actually that the number 1 seed, Kerber, she lost. Actually, yeah, like last year she was dominant. I think she won 3 Grand Slams, if I'm correct, or at least 2. I know for a fact she was very dominant last year. And then coming in this year, I think a lot of players. I mean, it's one of the biggest pitfalls that tennis players have. Once they become number one and once they win Grand Slams, they have so much pressure they cannot handle. Especially, I remember like I think it was Ivanovic. She had a similar problem. She won the French Open, became number one. She could not really carry it on, and so on and forth. I think Harper is also having that issues. She's number one. She just doesn't know how to handle the pressure. She hasn't had actually much of a great success this year. But yeah, I mean, we need to see how this French Open goes in the ladies section, especially. But our defending champion, Muguruza, her style of play is so aggressive. It's pretty great. Lastly, but not the least, on the women's side is Venus Williams. She's still playing. She's 37, I think now, 37, 36. But she's still playing. She's, I think, now in the quarterfinals or the fourth round. And she's going strong. So at least one of the Williams sisters is still playing, which is pretty amazing for their age.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about, because the number one seed is out, but you have players like the 2 seed is Karolina Pliskova, and then the third seed is Simona Halep. Neither of them have won a major before, and it seems like it's a wide open field with no Serena, and I guess no Sharapova is the first time those two have missed a Grand Slam since 2002.
As you said, it's a fairly open bracket for the ladies, but at the same time, our defending champion is still in play. And Simona Halep, right? She's seeded number 3. I mean, I watched her gameplay. I actually love her game. It's very athletic, and she's also like a grinder and so on for like the way that Nadal plays. I just love the way she plays. But I honestly thought like she should have won a Grand Slam by now, but she's been having issues. She's made a couple of finals, but she's never pulled through. And I really hope this is a tournament where she can pull through. And same with Pliskova. She's actually had a couple of successes in the past year. So that's the reason she's number. Yeah, it's actually an open bracket. And then I wanted Aggie to win as well, Wadzwanka, but she's not been playing well for the past year. So she just lost to Cornet. I just saw.
Finally, I guess one of the bigger stories that actually isn't on the court at the French Open is comments made by Margaret Court. Of course, she's a legend. She won 11 Australian Opens. On an interview, she basically said that she would not fly Qantas Airlines wherever possible because of its support of same-sex marriage. And then she went on to say that tennis is full of lesbians. And so there was strong reaction against her comments. And there's been a lot of players on the tour that have speculated that she's named after the number 2 court at the Australian Open, that they might potentially boycott her court, and there have been calls to change the name of that court. So what is your take on that situation?
No, that's actually a fair point. Yeah, like it's kind of horrible in my perspective. I mean, just say stuff like that, especially in this current day and age. I completely support the players. Like I think Milos Raonic recently said that he was going to boycott. And I respect the fact, like, all these players are taking action against such a thing. And in my opinion, like, if such comments are being made, she doesn't deserve to have, like, a court named after her. And, honestly, it's really shocking to see, like, such a thing happening now. But
absolutely. And also, I mean, like, she didn't even just go so far as to say, especially since like there's a huge debate in Australia, because Australia has yet to legalize same-sex marriage, and mostly a lot of that is due to efforts like people like Margaret Court, who I guess turned into an evangelical Christian pastor after her tennis career. But essentially, there's like she not only said that there's too many lesbians in tennis, but she said that basically lesbians have ruined the sport, and that they apparently, like, according to her, it's like, oh, like lesbians would like lure girls into parties and try to turn them into lesbians. And it's just, I mean, it's clearly bigoted statements. I mean, like, I don't know how it would be smart for anyone to like keep giving her the honor of having one of the courts named after her, in spite of the fact that, yes, I do understand that she had a success as a tennis player. But I mean, like, when someone is rewarded with the honor of having a court named after them, it shouldn't just be because they're a great tennis player. It should be because they're a good human being. And she does not have that. at all. I mean, like in the U.S., like we named a court after Arthur Ashe, not because he was the most dominant American player of all time, but because of like the amount of courage he had as a human being. I think it's high time that the Australian Open does change the court's name and give that honor to someone else who I feel would be more deserving.
Yeah, and it's not the first time she has said these comments. I think last year she made something similar to these, actually saying something of the same lines. And it's just been, such statements have been increasing in the past year. And I think it's high time that, as you guys were saying, that like the Australian Open committee actually changes the name from Margaret Court to something else.
Well, thank you so much, Tejas, for the insight and coming on and talking about the French Open. We'll see what happens this upcoming week. But thanks.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for stopping by, man.
All right. Talk to you soon.
So let's talk about the NBA Finals. They started Thursday. It was not much of a game. The Warriors won handily. Kevin Durant and Steph Curry were hitting everything in sight. What were your initial thoughts on the Game 1 obliteration of the Cavs?
My concern was just basically that like we were going to have like a blowout, and my biggest fears about this NBA Finals is already beginning to sort of like materialize. I mean, it's just again, like this is what we all feared, was that like we're just going to have an entire playoffs where there wasn't really much of a close game. There wasn't really much doubt about who was going to win. Credit obviously to like, Kevin Durant and Steph Curry for like stepping up and like really having great games the previous night. And I mean, it's not like LeBron didn't have a decent game, but I mean, like he almost had a quadruple double, but like the fourth statistic he was about to get double digits in was turnovers. And that was the big from that, from the Cavs perspective, was just like the amount of turnovers that this team, the turnover disparity between the two teams, and how little the Warriors turned the ball over. I believe they had like a record in the fewest amount of turnovers given versus the turnovers given by the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, like LeBron James had 7 turnovers in the first half. It feels like LeBron James is trying to do a little bit too much right now. He's trying to put too much on his shoulders. But I mean, we'll see what happens going forward, and whether or not like the Cleveland Cavaliers can make the adjustments, because right now, as the team is playing, I mean, like I don't see them win this series without really being able to shut down Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. I mean, the good thing about it right now in terms of the Cavs perspective, and with the way that the Warriors are playing, Klay Thompson does not seem to have been able to really get out of the funk. I mean, we talked about it last week about how Klay might be a bit of an X factor, in so much that like if they are able to shut down Durant and Steph Curry, which I don't at this rate, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But if they do find a way to do it, Klay can't step up, then this might be a closer series. But unfortunately, again, like I said, it just really feels like even if like Cleveland wins 1 to 2 games, like more than likely Golden State's going to run away with this.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last week. Golden State is a very underrated defensive team, and they forced a lot of bad decisions from the Cavaliers. And I agree with you. If they turn the ball over as much as they did in Game 1, it's going to be a sweep or a 5-game series, because you cannot give the Golden State Warriors 20 more shot attempts and expect to beat them. Golden State had 106 shots. Cleveland had 86. So it was the combination of the turnovers from Cleveland and also the offensive rebounds. I can't tell you how many times I saw like Steph Curry or a guard get in the lane and tap the ball back out and give another possession to the Warriors. That's not going to be good for Cleveland if they hope to have any shot. They also need better bench play. They got pretty much nothing off the bench. And we talked about this last week. Cleveland, we think, has a more complete bench unit with Darren Williams, Kyle Korver, Iman Shumpert. They just got nothing off the bench. And on your point on Klay Thompson, I actually think it's bad that he shot the ball that poorly and the Golden State still won by 22. Because, I mean, if Thompson gets on track at any point in the series, I mean, it's going to be over, because Cleveland just doesn't have enough shooting to match that. And as I said last week, they need to slow the game down. They need to play the game in the 90s, because if it gets into a track meet, like the first quarter was a close quarter, like Golden State was up 35-30, but just the pace of that game, it favored Golden State all the way. And that's what we saw in the third quarter when the Warriors pulled away.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I just like if it ends up being like a sweep or a 5-game series, then it wasn't this whole playoffs was not worth it. Like just this whole like blowout after blowout after blowout just is not fun playoff basketball to watch.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is probably the worst playoffs of any sport since I've been following sports that I've seen. Like basketball, football, baseball. This has just been horrible. Let's move on to baseball. So let's bring in our expert Evan Tenenbaum, who's so kind to join us again. So the Lone Star Series is underway in Arlington. The Rangers have continued their struggles. They've lost now 8 of their last 10. What's your take on the team, Evan?
All right, so record-wise, like the Rangers don't look good the last week or so. Statistically wise, it's not like they're playing as bad as a 2-8 team. That's where you run into problems where even the smallest statistic can ruin your chances of winning a game. This week, it was more bullpen issues, even though the offense has played pretty well, even with the return of Adrian Beltre, by the way, which is a godsend, and you need to be watching him because he will be getting 3,000 hits soon. I'd say sometime in the mid-July or so. He already got 6 hits in his return this week. So, like I said, pay attention to Adrian Beltre and not the rest of this team. Anyway, so let's recount a little bit what's going on this last week or so. They lost both to Toronto and Tampa Bay 1-2, basically playing pretty average. They weren't as bad as they were against Boston against these teams, but like I said, there's crucial aspects that are flawed, that are completely tanking the chances of this team playing well at this point. Bright spot in the Rangers this week was the offense. Like I said, Adrian Beltre came back, kind of shored up that lineup here with the 6 hits already in a home run last night. But there are other players that are playing extremely well. Nomar Mazara for the entire month of May has just been really, really, really good. He had 2 different long hitting streaks of the month and just ended with a 340 batting average, 17 RBIs in that month. Really, really good. He's settled very well in that 3 spot, and you want that from a second-year player. For you were wondering, is he going to repeat how good he played in his rookie year? Well, he has. He's been doing really well. And then always you got to look at Joey Gallo. He had 2 home runs in the last week. Look at the home run leaderboards right now. You got Aaron Judge, you got Mike Trout, who just got hurt, and then you got Joey Gallo and Miguel Sano. Like, that's some great company to be in on the AL leaderboards for home runs. With Joey Gallo, you always got your issues with strikeouts. But even with all of that, like, Joey Gallo is playing at an above average offensive level, and you definitely want that from him. And then the other guy I really want to highlight is Elvis Andrus, who must have gone on a career renaissance or something. He's been pretty consistent throughout the year, but has seemed to have taken another level in the last week or so. Currently hitting at 296, 338, 468 for the year. His OPS is 120 points higher than his career average. Specifically, that goes in towards his slugging. He already has 7 home runs. He only needs 1 more to match his career high, and it's only June. Like, something has happened in Elvis Andrus in the last year or two to suddenly maybe get a second wind of power. He's an actual offensive threat now. Like, it's insane.
I'm just happy to have Adrian Beltre back. Just that in itself. Just like, yeah, this should help.
I mean, it does. There's that intangible of having your veteran presence leadership in the actual lineup in the clubhouse doing things. You look at the Astros, they have McCann and Beltran doing that. Even if their stats aren't exactly up to par with everyone else, they still have the presence. And I think that's an intangible that you can't really measure with stats. And that's the best part about baseball, is those things that you can't measure with stats. So I guess some of the issues that you saw this week going on, some of the rotations starting to crack. I think we're just in a bad run spell for you, Darvish. He's now had 3 games in a row where he hasn't been able to complete more than 5 innings, giving up a crucial home run at literally the worst times. Last week it was for Jose Bautista, and last night it was Carlos Correa. These 3-run homers that are basically undoing them, at least for you, Darvish. The rest of the rotations, really mixed results. Cashner was extremely solid last week, but the rest of the group, Perez, and this is the same thing he's been doing all year, playing about average on the rotation, and his peripherals are actually pretty good, but he's getting unlucky. The amount of runners that he's letting on base, they're actually scoring at a higher rate than the rest of the rotation. which is insane because the rotation is doing really well with at least runners in scoring position, and that's what's given them success so far this year. But Perez is playing pretty average, which is what you kind of want out of him. You might want him to step up a little bit, at least with the rotation showing problems now, especially Nick Martinez, who's starting to crack. I don't know how long he'll last at this point. And then we have a spot start open, at least for last week when AJ Griffin went on the DL. Tyson Ross will most likely fill that role, but he may be slow coming out of the gate, coming out of his injury. He'll be back next week. So maybe that part of the rotation will be okay, but you never know. The real issues is the bullpen, once again. And, we keep harping on this podcast about how transit and how variable rotations can be. I just don't understand how some of the players on this team have had such a bad year in the bullpen. We're looking at three guys that I'm really looking at. Jeremy Jeffress, who the Rangers had traded for in that Lucroy deal as a potential late inning guy. He's at a 5.73 ERA right now. He's given up 14 earned runs in 22 innings, an insane amount of hits, well above average number of walks that he's given up. His strikeout rate is down. He's not doing his job. Then there's Tony Barnett, a 6.10 ERA, but actually really good peripherals, which is the funny part. So he may be on the shorter end of the struggling bullpen guys, but he did blow a game on Monday that had a lot of fans miffed. But the big issue is Sam Dyson, who had just gotten DFA'd on Thursday. A lot of fans rejoice. A lot of fans don't really know what to feel. He blew a game on Wednesday after Matt Bush had actually blown the save on the ninth inning, and then Dyson was pretty much the only guy left in the pen, and that's what happened. Management got tired of him, and he's gone. So I don't really know how to feel. Sam Dyson was your closer last year. He was a guy who you got in 2015 and was fantastic. Really, the only missteps in his career were that home run against Jose Bautista in the playoffs and pretty much all of this year. It's just a matter of literally three guys that have just fallen off so hard this season. It's really tanking some of these wins that you could potentially had. And it's really sad, specifically for Sam Dyson's case, just because of how good he was. If I ever had to put it on anything, it's not saying I'm blaming the strike zone raising, but I do think that had an effect on his best pitch was a sinker, one that starts at the middle of the plate and then sinks down to the bottom. So let's just say initially at the beginning of the year, and maybe in the Cleveland series, his sinker may be touching where it usually does, but the umpire doesn't call it. So now he has to raise it a little bit and raise it a little bit and raise it a little bit, and there it goes. It's out of the park. So after that happens, maybe something in his mind blocks the mechanical muscle memory of this is how I'm throwing my sinker. This is how it's going to do. Something blocks that, and then he just can't throw the sinker for the rest of the year. And there were times where his changeup came and went, but that sinker just stayed flat this entire year, and I think that's what doomed him.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just been a frustrating year just to follow this team. I mean, the bullpen, it's just, it feels like, I mean, like, granted, there have been people that have really stepped up. You have, obviously, like Matt Bush. I mean, outside of obviously blowing that save on Wednesday, and I mean, again, I would say he's probably one of the bigger reasons why we lost that game versus, like, Dyson. But, I mean, Dyson, you got to pay the price on that one. But yeah, like Dyson, he's at least come back and like seemed to at least like settle down in the role of a setup man. And then obviously Claudio has been okay. And then Beebens Dirk, I mean, like, yeah, like the spot start, not great, gave up 3 runs, but I mean, like he's been giving some solid effort. And then Dylan G, like last night, yeah, he gave up 4 runs, but he came in and helped finish off the game. But even then, it's just like, I mean, I at this point, I don't know how to really explain it outside of like what you just said about like, the change in the strike zone and then just, like lack of confidence for all these other players. I mean, like, I'd say I'm even more disappointed in Jeremy Jeffress just because, like, I mean, yeah, he's always had bad splits, but I mean, like, he's someone that was expected to at least be like someone that can be a good like right-handed pitcher out of the bullpen, and he's just not even been that necessarily, although it seems like he's at least settled down a little bit this past week. But I mean, we're now waiting as to see like whether or not the wheels again fall off for him, and then whether or not he's going to be DFA'd as well.
I have a question for you guys. So you guys the bullpen has just been so bad, and right now you're sitting 3.5 back in the wild card. There's a bunch of teams there. I mean, it's far from over, but are there guys on the farm that you could call up to fill that bullpen need? Is there a trade coming? Like, are you guys even going to be buyers at the deadline? Like, what is your feeling on the team?
So that's a lot of questions. I guess I'll go in order. Is there anyone on the farm? No, there's not. Probably the best person in minor leagues is a guy named Preston Claiborne, who has good numbers, but he's not on the 40-man, and he profiles as a journeyman kind of guy. So you're not really going to get that much better stats to help buffer the bullpen from him. The only other person I would know would be Connor Sadchik, but they're currently stretching him as a rotation guy right now, and they don't want to ruin that. And he's a legit prospect. So like, I don't know what you want to do with telling a guy, oh, our bullpen sucks in the majors. You're going to stop being a starter just so you can help us now. Probably not going to happen. Jose Leclerc just came off the DL. So once management finally decides, oh wait, I have an extra reliever, let's not keep him on the bench for 7 days in a row, they may put him in games, and he's a righty, so he'll I guess take that role that Dyson had. So I mean, there's not really much help coming at this point. So anyway, as far as buying and selling is, you already said it, Quan. We're 3.5 out. It's still June. It's still pretty early. Give this another month. We've already gotten rid of one of the struggling relievers, Sam Dyson. So I mean, we're going to stay patient with the other two at least, because they haven't been as bad, but still pretty bad. As far as buying and selling, like I said, it just depends on where we at in a month. But think about the AL West race, and it's a pipe dream at this point to catch up to the blazing hot Houston Astros. I've never seen such a team gel as good as the Astros have been doing. The game earlier this week where they were down 8-2 in the 8th inning, and they still won the game. That like you can't compete with that. Like, what do you see in the Astros? Like, why are they playing so well?
It's a special team, man. It's just, I think it's the best start for any team in the majors since I think the 01 Mariners, that team that won like 114 games, I believe. But number one, they have the best offense in the majors. Number two, they have two frontline starters in Dallas Keuchel and Lance McCullers, who are pitching out of their minds right now. And their bullpen has, while it's had its struggles at times, it's been good enough to be a top 5 bullpen. So, I mean, you put all those three together, you have a really good team, and you have a good mix of stars that are breaking out. And obviously, Carlos Correa is absolutely on fire right now. He was the American League Batter of the Month. He hit 386 with 7 home runs and 26 RBI that month. And he's only 22. So he is beginning to tap into all his powers. And you have veterans in Brian McCann and Carlos Beltran, Josh Reddick, Jose Altuve that have been there. And I mean, they're playing well for this team, providing veteran leadership. And I mean, you have a manager in AJ Hinch who seemingly has pushed all the right buttons with putting in Marwin Gonzalez. And I mean, obviously you also have career years. Marwin Gonzalez, again, nobody expected this from him. This is a guy that has been up with the Astros for the last 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden this year, last month he hit 382 with 7 home runs and 22 RBI. It's incredible, and nobody can really explain what's happened to Marwin, but you have career years from guys like that. You have young players breaking out, and you have veterans in there, and that's why this team looks like it's going to be the 2016 Cubs, because the way that they're just beating teams into oblivion right now. And as you mentioned, that game on Monday, they were 0-659 all time when trailing by 6+ going into the 8th inning. This offense just up and down the lineup, getting on with 2 outs and moving runners on. It's just, they used the line of keeping the line moving, which is something the Royals said in 2015 when they won the World Series. But it really is just up and down the lineup, just finding a way to get on base. And it's a balanced attack, and they have the best batting average 7 through 9 of any team in the majors. So it's all great right now. The only concerns, I guess, if you can call them concerns, is there's some injuries in the starting rotation. Charlie Morton, he's had injury issues in the past, and he's been pretty good for them this year as the number 3 starter, but he's going to be out. There's no time frame on it. He has a lat strain, so it's very variable how long the injury takes. So AJ Hinch said something around 3 weeks, maybe. If Joe Musgrove's going to be out one start, it seems. I think they're just going to give guys some extra time. They have a big lead, as you mentioned, in the AL West, so we don't really need to push guys if they're not feeling 100% at this point. So they've called up some guys from AAA. Brad Peacock has filled in nicely as a spot starter. So I still think that they're probably going to make a move for an arm at some point, but that's really the only bad thing I have on them right now. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, and from an outside perspective, I understand this is a rivalry, and I'm supposed to really I hate how the Houston Astros are playing so damn well, and they're 1-4 against the Rangers currently. But I a little bit in admiration of just how everything is just going so well for the team. And I guess from an outside perspective, you can look at all the flaws that you have on the team, but everything else is just being covered up by it. Specifically, you talked about the back of the rotation, how Charlie Morton's hurt, Joe Musgrove is hurt, Mike Fiers has been garbage back of the team. That leads you to, I guess, some slight concern that I guess we will have to get someone at the trade deadline to shore up the end of the rotation. You're always going to wonder, okay, well, which prospects am I okay with giving up? Which prospects am I going to forget and completely regret at the end of the season? And is this rotation piece going to be good enough to convert this down the stretch and then actually play well in the playoffs? So that's always an issue. You'd rather just have 5 solid guys in the rotation at the beginning and not have to worry about that. And then you talked about the veteran leadership. Not everyone on that offense is exactly hitting great. Nori Aoki's still well below average. He's playing well defense, but maybe you want a little bit more offensive production out of him. And the one I'm personally proud of, because I called it at the beginning of the year, is Carlos Beltran, hitting about average, but he's well below average for his career standards. His OPS is 60 points down from what it was last year with the Rangers. Similar amount of plate appearances. So I guess his offense comes in spades, but overall for the year, he's been just about an average player. But that's really all you need when everyone else is gelling. And it's not fair that the flaws of the Astros team aren't really being shown at this point.
Yeah, I mean, every team's going to have flaws, right? Even the Cubs last year, they had their. I mean, there's not going to be a perfect team that's going to win every game. And I agree, the back end of the rotation, it scares me a little bit, but it's just how good Keuchel and McHugh have been. Actually, I saw a stat that this team has a similar team ERA to the 2005 team that made it all the way to the World Series. And that team was all pitching. The offense was mediocre, but that team had Roy Oswalt, Roger Clemens, Andy Pettit. You had Brad Lidge, Dan Wheeler, and Chad Qualls in the bullpen. That team was all pitching. And it has a similar ERA to this team. And you look at it on paper, you wouldn't think that. But, I mean, they still have Colin McHugh, who's working his way back from that dead arm. And hopefully you're going to get him back at some point. And if he's anywhere near where he was in 2015, where he's a 20-game winner, I think that's going to be a boost. David Paulino made a start from AAA. He had a pretty good game. So if you can continue to get good outings from him, he could join the rotation. Musgrove has been up and down, but when he's been up, he's been really good for them. So, I mean, there's enough guys in-house that, you might not need to make a deal, but, I mean, it's going to be a wait-and-see approach because obviously you don't want to be going to the playoffs with issues in the starting rotation.
Let me tell you about personal experience that you're going to need a guy. You can never have enough rotation depth. Someone's going to falter. You can't really trust spot starters. And I'm saying this is personal experience. The last 3 or 4 times the Rangers have been competitive, that number 4, number 5 doesn't sustain that success. And so you're probably going to need a new rotation guy. And I eagerly await who you get, a Chris Archer kind of guy, Garrett Cole kind of guy, Jose Quintana, right?
How about the Dutch oven?
I don't know how I'd feel about that now that I'm thinking about it. Pretty okay year in Chicago right now. His peripherals are about career average, but his ERA is doing pretty good right now. I've heard his velocity is also up too. So definitely is going towards that trade bait thing that I predicted he would be at the beginning of the year. Yeah,
I want to talk quickly, I guess, around the league. The Astros have the West, I guess, in hand at this point. I mean, it's still a long way to go. I guess the Angels really were dealt a blow this past week when Mike Trout went on the DL. Do you see that team being able to stay afloat with him out?
Absolutely not. That is a crucial blow to the Angels lineup. They already were down 4 or 5 starting pitchers, including Garrett Richards, who was very content in the Cy Young 2 or 3 years ago. But has just been unhealthy. Tyler Skaggs has been pretty average for that team, but everyone else has been hurt on that rotation. And then it's just not a good combination of losing all your pitching and, your best offensive player and probably the best offensive player you'll have in your franchise. So I just don't see how players like Cole Calhoun and Andrelton Simmons and Maldonado and Albert Pujols can really sustain this team in the playoff race. Like, you'll eventually see in the dog days of summer that they'll probably fall off. The one other thing I'd like to talk about for this week was the Bryce Harper Strickland situation on Monday. Strickland had thrown at Bryce Harper in a game with the Giants and the Nats, I guess as a retaliation for when Bryce Harper hit a home run off him in the playoffs 2 or 3 years ago. And Harper took offense to that, threw his helmet. Well, I guess the intention was to throw it at Strickland, but it kind of veered off to the side, and then they got into a brawl, got some good punches. Both of them got suspended. The benches had cleared. Probably the best brawl we've seen since last year's Toronto-Texas brawl. But in my opinion, I think it's personally ridiculous for both of these players to do what they did. Strickland for throwing at a guy because he hit a home run off you 3 years ago. Are you kidding me? And then Harper for throwing his helmet. Are you kidding me? Like, I understand getting plucked by a baseball hurts a lot, but that's the whole point of baseball is you're in the batter's box. You should understand that fastballs may come towards you. No one expects a helmet to be thrown towards them. So, I mean, I think both suspensions are personally reasonably justified. There's no winner in this.
Yeah, agreed. So this past weekend, Evan ended up going to go see a golf tournament and got to follow around some of the best players up in Fort Worth at the Colonial. Evan, what were some of the takeaways that you had from that?
I wouldn't necessarily call these the best players. This is one of those minor level tournaments that are kind of in transition between Players Championship, which was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then the U.S. Open, which is in 2 weeks. Nevertheless, it is a local tournament, so I was lucky enough to go to it as a matter of being able to follow around some of the golfers that you would want to, specifically Jordan Spieth. We've been hyping on him all throughout this podcast as a former UT player. So he ended up going to this tournament and ended up actually playing pretty well. I think he shot 2 or 3 under on the day that we were there. We caught him at the third tee. We stood right in front of the ropes where they walk up, and then he hit his shot, and then he kind of came back while his partner was hitting his shot. And he was about 3 feet in front of me. I could have reached over the ropes to touch him. Obviously, I didn't want to get kicked out, so I didn't. But it was also insane seeing how close you are to a multimillionaire golfer who, no matter what you do in your career, will pay more money than you. So that was pretty neat. We kind of followed him around a little bit, saw him about 5 or 6 different holes. He, like I said, finished second for the tournament. Only one shut off, which is funny because we did end up seeing him on the 9th hole where he just barely missed a chip shot that would have gotten in for a birdie, and he ended up missing the par putt. So fates could have been different. He could have won this tournament based on that one hole. Other players that we did end up chasing on the flip side, Kevin Kisner, who did end up winning the tournament, played pretty well on the 4th day, but he didn't have such a good 3rd day where he played even. We also saw Paul Casey, who had an insane 3rd day, but ended up faltering at the end. And then Sergio Garcia, who was actually a little bit higher for him because his fiance is a UT alum, and he had just won the Masters. So it was always interesting to see what the Masters winner can do. Had a pretty pedestrian day. He had an insane shot on the 13th hole, which is a par 3 that goes over water. Historic, I guess, at least for the Colonial. That looked really good coming off the tee box, and the crowd loved it with the grandstands really, really close to that green over there. So, kudos to him, even if he didn't finish in the top 10 at that point. Also, funny story, Ryan Palmer, who is a former A&M player, had an awful showing at the tournament, but we ended up catching his exit on the 18th hole on Saturday. My friend who works with a guy who's friends with Ryan Palmer, he does the same thing where we go up to the ropes and say, we shout out the golfer's name or whatever. My friend goes, "Hey," my friend Dave says hi, right to Ryan Palmer as he's working up the hill, going back to the clubhouse. Ryan Palmer looks up at who just said that, and my friend who's wearing a burnt orange shirt just kind of does that whole hook 'em sign towards Ryan, and then Ryan in response just goes gig 'em, really frustrated, lifting his thumb just kind of at his chest, and then just walks away dejectedly, and it was pretty funny. So, with the bad round that he had, I'm sure he was not in the mood for any UT fans. Anyway, it was really fun, very hot, got to drink some beer, eat some food, catch the golfers that we wanted to see. if you have a remote interest in golf, it's definitely better going to a tournament, walking around the course, than sometimes having to sit at home for 5 or 6 hours waiting for the minimal TV coverage that golf gets at this point, unless it's a major tournament. Speaking of which, the U.S. Open is in 2 weeks. All the golfer players are really preparing for what should be a great U.S. Open tournament. Currently, Jason Duffner is leading at the Memorial, which is this week, as far as preparation goes. But the one person who's not preparing right now because he had an issue with the law is Tiger Woods, getting a DUI earlier this week. He actually was not above the drinking limit, but he had apparently taken too many pills that he was taking and actually fell asleep at the wheel. Ended up getting booked for it. So it's just a matter of what happened to Tiger Woods' career. Like, what have you seen in the guy?
Well, I think he got divorced like that. I think it was just a combination of just like, I mean, again, and it's hard to really say because I don't like prying into someone's like private life necessarily in this way, especially when it's just like very clear to me that just like a lot of it is just like he's going through a lot of things and he's trying to sort through a lot of emotions that I don't think he's really able to process at this point, because he just like he never really understood like what it is that he was supposed to do. I mean, like you look at a guy who's like from pretty much like from childhood has been sort of like pressured to become the best golfer of all time, and like I mean, like granted he kind of reached those heights pretty early on, and I remember back in the day when he was just like the guy. I mean, you would have like this lull in his game, but then like he like that one time that BJ Singh like won a player of the year, but then like he turned around and he was still he turned out and he came back in and he was even better. But I mean like I think just getting caught in like basically the divorce and like losing out, like I don't think he lost complete custody of his kids. I think he's still able to visit his kids, but I mean like I mean like not being able to come home and see your kids all the time, I mean like that in itself probably that probably itself hurts. I mean, it's very sad. The whole thing is an incredibly sad instance of just someone that, like, I mean, and granted, also, I mean, like, it was also very self-inflicted. I mean, like, he should not have been cheating on his wife. I mean, that goes without saying. I at the end of the day, it's just sort of like tragic to see like how far he's gone. He's fallen. I mean, and granted, like this, even though he was charged with DUI, like, I mean, like, he wasn't. He blew in a breathalyzer and he was like 0.00 with for his BAC. So I mean, it just looks like he passed out in his car and the police just decided to bring him in.
Yeah,
I mean, he doesn't look happy.
Yeah, Tiger's really running, I guess, into some issues with, I guess, his health at this point. All the years of surgeries and being able to keep up with the golf season. It's finally really weighing down on him. He's only played in like 1 or 2 tournaments in the last 2 years. He's already out for the season this year. He hasn't won a tournament since 2013, the Bridgestone Invitational. I mean, if you want a competitive Tiger, you're going to have to get a time machine and go back 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen. Like, he has 4 majors to go to tie Jack Nicklaus for the most majors. It's looking like the 2008 U.S. Open is going to be his last one. And that's really sad because literally Tiger Woods, with the combination of my dad, is the reason that I play golf. Is the reason I watch golf. There was no one at the time who had the star power that Tiger Woods had at the peak of his game. Like, he may have saved PGA, and hopefully there are some young guys in the PGA Tour right now who are trying to save him again, but can't rely on Tiger Woods anymore. And that's really sad. Yeah. He was the guy. He was the face of the sport. There was no one that could match him. And maybe that was his downfall, because he had no quote unquote competition that he feels like he could have just coasted through. And maybe both in his professional and his personal life, he could have just coasted through. And maybe that's what his downfall was. Who knows?
Exactly. I mean, like, I remember back when like people were talking about how like like it was only a matter of time before he like passed Jack Nicklaus, but that's not going to happen. I don't know what it is that's like what happened to it. Like, I mean, obviously at the end of the day, I can't really speak for him, but I mean, just the injuries and just the mental, the emotional toll, I guess, that his whole like personal life basically crumbling around him, and just I mean, the fact that of the matter is that like golf is also very much like an emotional and mental game, and if you're not completely focused, you're not going to do well. And I mean, just like I don't know how it would have been possible for very few other people to focus with the amount of stuff that was going on in his personal life.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I mean, just hope he gets the help that he needs, and just like, like he's able to turn his own personal life around. Like, I mean, at this point, I don't want to say I don't care about golf. I care about golf, but I for him, I care less about whether or not he ever putts again. I just want him to be okay.
Definitely. I think that's what we all want is for those kinds of guys to be humble and fix their mistakes and just turn out okay in the end. And that's the thing about sports is why get frustrated at a player's performance and then go on and call out on the player and make fun of him and do all that kind of stuff. As a fan of that team or player or whatever, you want them to succeed? Don't you want to just rather be upset that they didn't execute, and then hopefully they'll try again later? It's just saddening to me how reactionary some fans of either teams or players can get when the player is just playing awful. It's just sometimes it feels like there's a sentiment of, oh, I expect them to play well, and I'm going to be mad if they don't. I'd rather be upset and hope rather than be angry and frustrated and say brash, mean things to someone who doesn't deserve it. Remember, these are still people. They have feelings, and I'm sure they get heckled a lot. But like some of the things you can say, like like the whole Adam Jones situation that we talked about earlier this month, that's completely unwarranted sometimes.
Yeah,
And
no, to some certain extent, like it's something that you're alluding to. There's sort of like an entitlement among fans that you have to perform a certain way, and if you don't, then they can sort of like rag on you.
Yeah, and obviously that's not something that we can fix overnight. It's not like that's the good thing about sports is that we can be rowdy and loud and in that, but I just wish sports fans would stop acting a little bit entitled. There's a lot of Rangers fans that are clamoring for people's heads because of this season this year. But do you guys forget the early 2000s, how bad we were back then? Besides the 3 years in the 90s and this recent run in the early 2010s, like the Rangers have been an awful team. That should be the expectation. Is just them to go out and play average, and then you get the benefit of being here in a good team. And then that's what you should really expect in sports is I'd rather be surprised at a good performance than frustrated at a bad one.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's just there's just a thing about like managing expectations and like how people sort of like lash out at said expectations and react poorly. I think it's just a lot of it is also just like I mean, like, and again, like I don't like talking about this because this also cries into other, like I'm trying to like talk for other people's like personal lives or own personal state of mind. I mean, I can only relate back to like my own experiences, but I mean, like I know I've personally been guilty of like a lot of this, like of behaving in those certain ways, acting entitled to like someone's like performance and like acting out and saying like, oh, you suck as a person, go away, to someone just because they're not doing their job.
That's a nice way of putting it. Go away.
Yeah, no, it was much worse than that, and there's not a single day that goes by that I think about it and I'm like ashamed of it. Of the way I've behaved, and I mean, looking back, whenever I acted that way, I mean, and looking at the type of person I was, like, I can't exactly say I was like super like emotionally stable, and I think that's just part of it is just like people tried to find a place to put like an emotional outlet, and they try to find that in something in sports. And like the thing about it is like, I mean, it's understandable just because like the highs with sports can be so incredibly high. I mean, I remember the first time the Rangers made it to the World Series and just being so elated and just like going outside my house and like just jumping around the street and just sort of being happy. I mean, granted, I was the only one out there that was doing it, but I mean, like, and just like, just having that sort of emotional, in a sense, it can be kind of addictive in a way, but also just like, I mean, you put all that in there, but you have so little control over it. And I mean, that's something you have to sort of remind yourself that like, this isn't like at the end of the day, this is just a game, and this is just a bunch of people that are just like playing games, and like at the end of the day, what you should be is just entertained. You shouldn't be so emotionally tied up that like whether they win or lose like really affects like how you behave the next day.
Definitely, I 100% agree with that. That's a lot rational and surprise in the future.
Let's move on to our shout outs. For me, MLS, Houston Dynamo, FC Dallas play last week. It was a 0-0 draw in Frisco. I mean, it wasn't without drama. Goalkeepers battle between Tyler Derrick and Jesse Gonzalez. A lot of highlight saves, but it was a big result for the Dynamo getting their first point on the road in 6 matches this year. And for FC Dallas, Mauro Diaz, their playmaker, coming back 7 months after tearing his Achilles. And so to see him get some minutes at the end, he's definitely a difference maker for that team. And they're currently sitting third in the West. The Dynamo are, again, they're the biggest surprise in MLS, I'd say. They're first in the West. They killed RSL midweek 5-1. They've already equaled their win total of 2016 and through just 14 of their 34 games this year. So just a complete turnaround. But again, the home road difference is just, at home, they look like Real Madrid. On the road, they look like an 8-year-old team. It's completely different. So they're going to have to get that solved. So that's the MLS update. Also, UT baseball. So Texas baseball is in the Long Beach Regional. Continual good vibes for them as they try to advance in the College World Series. And finally, Takuma Sato, the first Japanese racer to ever win the Indy 500. So congratulations to him.
So shout outs to Mr. Met for getting fired for flipping off all the fans at Citi Field. I mean, like if you're gonna get fired, like maybe the way to go is like guns a-blazing. And then shout out to Joe Lenardi's way too early bracketology, because apparently he has Texas already as a 10th seed. And I mean, like that's an improvement over last year, so that would be nice. And I mean, obviously that's what you hope with Andrew Jones coming back and bringing in people like Matt Coleman. Another shout out, I guess, to the person that threw a catfish onto the ice. He's a Nashville fan, and he was like, you know what, like this is a tradition in Nashville. Let's do it in Pittsburgh. And he got arrested. Quick shout out to the Dallas Mavericks, who celebrate the 6th anniversary of one of the greatest NBA games of all time, or at least that I've seen, in Game 2 of the 2011 NBA Finals. Where they came back down 15 points, 88-73, and pulled out an amazing comeback and basically started what would end up being their one and only championship against one of the best teams of all time in the Big Three of Miami. So yeah, shout out to the Dallas Mavericks on that amazing anniversary.
I want you guys to visit our website, twoNatesOnSports.com. Also like our Facebook page at 2NatesOnSports. We're approaching 40 likes now, so go like that page. Also subscribe on our YouTube channel as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, where you'll get a notification as soon as we release our new episodes. We want to thank Tejas Prasad and Evan Tenenbaum for coming on today, and I'll talk to you next week, Nathan.
Talk to you later then.